Hi everybody, this is Greg with The Dice Must Flow. Welcome back to another episode. And today's episode kind of crosses all the spectrums that I like to cover. It's both board game and miniature game and painting. And so this game came out by Games Workshop about a month ago, and it's really the new hotness on the internet. It's taken me quite a while to get this done. And one of the reasons it's taken me, and I'm a little late to this, is because, well, unlike a lot of people who have shows that are showing these things perhaps the week before the product is even coming out, it's something I have to purchase, get funds for, and go ahead and buy, and then learn to play, and then bring you the video. So I apologize that it's a little bit late, but if you do like my videos, you can help by going ahead and subscribing to my channel. As I get more subscribers, perhaps I can actually try and talk to some of the different game companies and try and get some pre-releases and information that way. So anyway, today's video is about Warhammer Shadespire, and it's really a very, very good game. It's tactical, miniatures, and board game with card and deck development. And so let's go ahead and take a look at Shadespire. So Shadespire is the game by Games Workshop, new board game that is arena combat in the world of Warhammer. The first thing I wanted to talk about is this board game requires you to build some of the miniatures that you will use. But this shouldn't really be a concern. These are really just 2 or 3 piece miniatures, mostly just snapping together. And I know a lot of people who follow the channel do play miniature games, so they wouldn't be put off by it. But, you know, just if you're a board gamer, don't worry about putting these miniatures together. In fact, it's so simple. We're just going to go ahead and put one together here live and show you how it's done. Okay, we're going to go ahead and build one of these miniatures, and that is, we'll build one of the Khorne warriors. And as you can see, there's instructions from the box game that talks about how to put them. They have each number label, each piece labeled, and how to do it. So you can see here that this guy is just 3 pieces, one of which is the base. You get 1, 2, 3, and so let's go ahead and find him and put him together. All right, so all the Khorne pieces start red. A lot of people are painting the miniatures that you use because that's part of the hobby. But if you're just a regular board gamer, you're used to playing with just regular colored pieces. So let me try and get in here. I don't know if you can see. This is labeled 1, labeled 2. So we're going to cut those out. And I just have a regular clippers here that I'm using. You can use a knife, or you can actually probably just snap them off. Well, they probably do need a clippers or a knife. And I'm going to try and make sure I have this in the camera feed as opposed to the back of my hand. So some of these, once you get them started, you can clip them off. You can take a knife, clean up these edges where you clipped. Like right here you can see. I'm going to go ahead and get number 2. And a lot of people go ahead and where these are put together, these are clipped off. They call them mold lines or whatever, and they go ahead and clean these up real good before painting. So that might be something you're interested in if you get into the hobby. But as you can see, these guys are actually set to where the pieces are just gonna go together and snap together. And you can see when I start putting it in, this piece, this little flashing here needs to come off. So just got a little hobby knife here, and I'm gonna get that flashing piece off. Okay, so here we go. 3, 2, 1 to put them together. Bam, done. And you don't even need glue for this guy. And so there he is. And so this guy's foot goes into the slot here. clean this off. So you can see his foot goes there, so we're going to start there, and this guy pushes in, and boom. This guy's done. So as far as if you want to play as a board game, you just throw these all together like this. Nothing to be worried about as far as somebody younger, or if you're not experienced painting, just you can play like this. So I'm going to go ahead and throw all the rest of these together, and we'll be back after they're together and talk more about the game. Alright, we're back, and we have all the guys assembled. Red being the Khorne, blue being the Stormcast Eternals. I'm sure there's a Halo joke, red versus blue there somewhere. Let's go ahead and take a look at the components. So I should mention it took me about 30 minutes to put those guys together. So what do you get in the game? You're going to get a deck of cards for each faction. So you get one for the Blood Reavers, one for the Liberators, and then you have extra cards. And I'm going to go ahead and put these aside for now. But these are when we get into deck construction. You can actually build different decks. So one thing I liked about the way the game came is that it actually had these wrapped up separately. So your deck, your starter deck is sort of built for you. So we've got counter sheets, and these are objectives and damage tokens and glory, charge markers, move markers, defense markers, and the game boards themselves. And of course, dice. So I guess let's start by taking a look at the dice. The white dice are your attack dice. And there's 6 sides to them. And I'm trying to find the different results. An exclamation is a critical success. A hammer is a hit if your character has hammer. And there are 2 hammers on the dice. So there's 2 hammers on the dice. There's a single cross swords on the die. And there's 2 supports. A single support and a double support. And we'll talk about these later. The defense dice are, again, 6-sided. They have a critical success, a defense symbol of a block, a defense symbol of a dodge, by the way, and there's 2 blocks on the dice, 2 shields on the die, 1 single dodge, and then again a single double support and a single support. So before the game begins, each player can construct a deck, or you use the pre-constructed decks. In addition to that, you have cards for each of your characters. So let's take a look at the cards and the decks. So looking at the Stormcast cards, we have 3 characters, each representing one of our minis. And they actually have a picture of the mini for the characters up there. So this is Severin Steelheart. This is Angrad. And this is Orvin the Bold. Oberon the Bold. And so we look at the characters. Let's go through what is on a card. So on the card we have the character's move, the character's defense dice, and the number of hit points the character has. We also have a stat that shows his attacks, and in this case he has 1 attack. He gets to roll 2 dice, and attacks that are hammer results on the die, and remember 2 out of 6 have hammers, so hammers are really better. And if he gets a success, he does 3 damage. Looking at the on-card Bright Shield, for example, he has the same movement. He has 1 attack, but he gets to roll 3 dice and has hammers. And if he has a success, then he is going to do 2 damage. The other interesting thing about the game is that each of these characters has an inspired side. So this is the starting side, but you can flip over to the inspired side. And on the inspired side, they tend to move more or do more damage or get extra attacks. And so how do you get inspired? We have to go back and look at the original card, and the gold text tells us how this character gets inspired. So when this fighter rolls a shield or a critical, when the target of an attack, he becomes inspired. And in that case, he flips over. Blood Reavers are pretty much the same. There's 5 of them. And I'm only going to put 2 of them down for now. But you can see most of the Khorne, or the Blood Reaver guys, actually move 4, but their defense isn't as good. They have 1 defense die, but they only get success on the dodge. And you can see that they actually inspire when at least 3 fighters are out of action. So 3 fighters on their side or the opponent's side are out of action. Then the entire squad is going to get the flip, and that's going to be all 5 guys. When they become inspired, they tend to move more, and they do more damage. So this guy goes from a movement 4 to a movement 5, and his damage becomes 3 from 2. And as we look at the Khorne guys, more of them tend to have success on swords instead of axes, so they don't hit as hard or succeed as often. Much of the game does cover combat, and so I thought I'd just start with going over how that works and the dice work and everything. And so for this example, I'm going to use Agrad Bright Shield, Bloodied Sake, and Targor. And we're not going to go into movement or any of that stuff, just how the combat actually works. In this case, if it was the Blood Reaver's turn, and they had a guy that moved here next to Targor, you would see that this is Bloodied Sake. And so he has a range 1 attack and has 2 attack dice and does 3 damage on a success. Now I want to point out it's important to say that this is 3 damage on a success. If he actually rolls 2 dice and gets 2 successes, two hammers, then that's really just he got a success. If he beats the opponent, and we'll talk about what it is to beat the opponent, then he'll get a success and do 3 damage. If he gets multiple successes, he's not going to be doing 2 times 3 or 6 damage. It's only 3 damage, 1 attack. So in this case, Bloodied Sake would be rolling 2 dice, and he's looking for a critical or a hammer. Alright, so in this case he rolled a single hammer and a support, but he doesn't have anybody next to him, so there is no support. We'll talk about what support is. And so we'll see that Angrad actually has 1 defense die, so he's going to get to roll 1 die, and what he needs to beat this is either a critical or a shield. So he got a critical, and a critical trumps everything, and so a critical trumped it, and so no attack hit. Even if we had 2 hammers, this critical trumps the 2 hammers, so the attack would miss. If you had a critical and that against a critical, that's a push. Nothing happens there either. If he had gotten a shield and there was a single hammer against a shield, again, 1 with 1, net of 0, nothing happens. So you really need to get more successes, and criticals trump successes. One other thing is if the attacker has more critical successes than the defender, then the attack succeeds. So if we had this guy attack and got 2 criticals, and the defender himself actually got a critical, then the attack would succeed. So we'll talk about support. That's these funky things here. So when you attack or defend, when you attack and you have support, if Sake is attacking and has 1 character next to the opponent that he is attacking, he has a single support. If he would have 2 characters next to the guy he's attacking, he would have a double support. And so if he has single support, and he rolls this symbol, then that counts as a success. If he has double support and he rolls this symbol, the double support symbol, then that also counts as a success. Defensively also you can have support. And a defensive support is, for example here, where you have a guy, when the person is attacking, bright shield, if there's a person next to the attacker, then the defense player gets defensive support. And if he has two of them, he's going to get the single defense die for one, the double defense support for two players next to him. So one person, this die is active, two persons, this die is active. So in this case, he's going to have critical, shield. The only thing that's actually going to miss a defense on him on this situation is this single dodge symbol. So again, you're going to roll your attacks, you're going to roll your defenses, you're going to count up your successes. If the successes are even, they fail, but criticals trump everything, and criticals, the number of criticals, if they're even, then it's also a failed attack. And so that's how combat works. Okay, the next major thing that this game involves is using the deck or the cards to enhance your characters. And one of the important things here is something called deck construction. And so each player is going to have a deck. For example, this is the Stormcast Eternals starter deck. And you can see that they have actions that are listed for Stormcast Eternals. And then there's other actions that are generic. And so these could be used by any race or character. So they could actually be put into a corn deck. So there are two different types of cards or for a deck. There's objective cards, and these objective cards are really going to determine the winner of the game. And so each objective card is going to give how many glory you gain when this objective is completed. So this one gets 3, and this one gets 2. And for example, this one, score this in the third and end phase. If none of your fighters are out of action, you would get 3 glory. Or you could just have a regular denial objective, or maybe a better example is just hold objective 1. And we'll get into what the objective numbers are and how you place them. But basically, if you end of the turn on a particular objective, you're going to get 1 glory for that. So in your action deck, I'm not sure that's the proper term, but basically you have a objective deck and an action deck, and there are multiple types of cards in there. The sword shows that this is just a regular action, and this sort of gear icon is showing that this is an upgrade. And so upgrades actually are placed onto a character, and they can be upgraded. So if this character was upgraded with, I'm going to move it into the center here, if this character was upgraded with the block, for an action, this fighter and all adjacent friendly fighters go on guard. Or you have action cards, which could play, it says, you can play, choose 2 fighters that are adjacent to each other and switch them with this confusion. So at the time that you would play cards, you could play this and switch fighters. And of course there are some that give more damage. So for example, this one, +1 damage to the first attack action with a range of 1 or 2 in the next activation phase. So we'll talk about activation phases and when you would play these cards and how you would play them and objectives. But I wanted to go through that there are these decks, that each player has an action deck and an objective deck. And then the other thing about this is that there's a whole nother deck, and as expansions come out, there's going to be other cards that are added. So there's extra cards. And so you can see in these extra cards, these are marked Stormcast, so they can only be played by a Stormcast deck, or these are marked by Khorne, so they can only be played by a Khorne deck. And there's generic ones as well. So each player before the game can actually build a deck unique to their character or the class or playstyle that they're looking for. And so that's really something kind of unique. Now, one of the concerns I had about this when I heard about this game was that it kind of would turn into sort of a Magic, in the sense that each player, the guy who went out and bought the most cards, if there was one really powerful card, somebody bought like 5 sets, put 5 of them in their deck or something, or you would be forced to do that. But under the deck construction rules, you're only allowed one of a particular card in your deck. And so I think that's going to stop that, and it's not really a concern. So deck construction rules, I think you have to have 12 objectives in your deck, and I think I forget a minimum of, I think, 20 cards in your in this type of deck. So let's go ahead now and take a look at how the game actually plays and how you would win. So looking at the gameplay, there's setup, which is actions of placing the board, place the objective tokens, draw cards, and then place your fighters. And then the game only takes 3 rounds, which is the action phase and end phase each round, and at the end there's victory. So kind of unique here is placing boards. When you place the boards, you can roll for who goes first and who places the boards. That's in the rules. I'm not going to go through a complete rule run through. But basically you can place the board in such that you have to have 3 connecting squares. So this is a legal board placement, as is something like that. If I can find it. 3 squares, yeah. Or end is long is fine. Or just the standard thing like this, shifted anyway, such that 3 squares. And I think that the objective of doing that is maybe so you can create pinch points or try and vary up the battlefield a little bit. The next step is placing the objective markers, which randomly are determined, and each player is going to get these objectives, and they're going to place them. And they're not going to place them on these spots that are marked with symbols, because that's actually where the characters are allowed to start. So I could place on my opponent's board, I could place on my board. So as they get placed out here, like that for example, then they would be flipped, and you would see that this is objective, and they're labeled 1 through 5, 1 through 6. Actually, I'm making a mistake, because in a 2-player game, you only start with 5 objectives. As we talked about in the card playing objective deck, there are objectives for hold objective 1. So at the end of the turn, if you hold objective 1, scoot up so we can see, at the end of the turn, if you hold objective 1, you're going to get 1 glory for that. And there's a hold objective 1 through 5 in all of these decks. So that's how you place objectives. And then you would take turns placing your miniatures. And as I was just saying, miniatures have to be placed onto the starting locations. So perhaps if you're playing defensively, you might have the 3 of them in the back, and you have to place them on your half of the board. So you know, you might have the 5 characters out like that. And so that would be placing characters. Each player would then draw their hand of cards, which would be drawing their hand of power cards and objectives. That would be done before placing the fighters, and you would get to look at those. So if you knew if you had a hold objective 1, for example, you might place such that your next... Okay, the next thing I've added out onto the board are these tokens, which are called action tokens. And so in a round, each player is going to only have 4 actions. And so when they activate something, you're going to flip over to show that that is you. So what can you do with an action? You can make a move action. You can make a charge action. You can go on guard. You can make an attack action printed on a fighter. There are also activations that don't involve activating a fighter. So you can also do something like draw a power card from the top of your power deck, or discard an objective card and draw a new objective card. Or you can just actually pass and do nothing. Perhaps if you're sitting on the proper objectives that you want, you're just going to want to sit there. So to do a move action, you would flip, and you would move your character the number of places they're allowed to move. To do an attack action, you actually have to be next to a character, and then you would flip and do an attack action. To do a charge, and this is the most common thing I think in this game, you actually flip your counter and you move your movement. For example, if I was here, I would move my movement and then make an attack. And we would have to mark that as a charge being done. and they have a counter for that, so you can actually attack multiple times. But once you charge an attack, that character is done. He can't do anything else. A character can only move once, so he can actually move but not attack, so you would mark it as moved. But then he could attack multiple times in a turn. For example, if you had somebody next to him, you could flip 3 actions, 3 different phases, and attack with that guy 3 times. After each activation by a player, for example, if this character would activate and charge, we would resolve that attack action. Then with the active player, you go into a power step. And you can take turns playing cards from your hand, power cards. And so I could perhaps play this Blood Offering on this character. Choose a friendly fighter. They suffer 1 damage. Roll 2 extra attacks for the first attack action and the next activation. And so perhaps I'd play this on Sark, and I would put it over with Sark's card. It would make more sense, because if then my next activation when I play Sark, he could charge and actually get 2 extra attack dice for his action. Playing it on this character might not make a whole lot of sense, because he's already charged and is really not going to get an attack. It'd have to be the whole next turn before that would take place. But I could play, the Khorne player could play a power card, and then the Stormcast player could play a power card. And that's not a good example, but perhaps this one is. +1 damage to the first attack action with a range of 1 or 2 in the next activation. So if this player had charged and I played Blood Offering over on Sark, the Stormcast player could play the Righteous Zeal on this character, and then when he attacked here, he's going to get this bonus. So you take turns basically going after each activation. You take turns playing the power cards, and until nobody plays a power card. And then that activation is done, and it goes on to the next player's activation. And you keep going back and forth this way until all 4 activations for the turn are completed. Okay, I also want to talk about the upgrade cards. For example, this card has an upgrade. Now it has to be played during one of those power phases, but to play it, you actually have to have a glory. So you would have to have scored glory at the end of the turn by holding objectives or one of your objective cards. Or when you kill or remove a player from the board, for example, if this guy had killed him, the Stormcast player would have 1 glory. And then during his power activation phase, he could play this, and now the glory, you would flip it over. It's a used glory. You still get that glory for victory point at the end of the game. But you're able to play the specific card onto one of your characters. In this case, it would be this fighter's attack action gains cleave. And we can talk about what those types of things are a little bit later. After each 4 actions are completed, you go into an end phase, and you resolve and look at objectives. Players can then reveal objectives that they've completed. Those objectives are then set aside. People gain the glory for those objectives. And then the next phase is going to begin, and you're going to draw new objective up to your object. You're going to refill your hand with objectives and refill your hand with these power cards. So I wanted to clarify that end phase a little bit. Basically, you can check your objective cards, and if you've met them, you're going to get the glory for that. Place any revealed that way in the discard pile. Discard any or all of your remaining objective cards, placing them in the discard pile. You can reveal and play any upgrade cards in the same way as you would after the end of an action. And if you have fewer than 3 objective cards in your hand, you draw objective cards until you have 3 in your hand, or your objective deck is empty, which that's important. If you burn too many objective cards, just discarding them, they do not replenish. You do not reshuffle. And if you have fewer than 5 power cards, you're going to replenish your power card hand. And so that's basically it. You go through round 1, round 2, round 3, and at the end of round 3, whoever has the most glory is the winner of the game. Now there's a few other things I want to talk about, and those were things I talked about: cleave and guard and charge and knockback that I talked about. I said we'll talk about a little bit later. So a cleave attack action is an action if you have cleave, the target of that cleave action cannot use any of the defense symbols, the shield symbols on the defense dice. Those are ignored. So really cleave against this Khorne force, who shield symbols don't do anything for them anyway, is fairly worthless. But cleave works against maybe a Stormcast for a Stormcast type game, or against other players that or other races that are going to have shield symbol defenses. A guard is an activation that you can take, an action you can take. And when you go on guard, you place a guard token next to the fighter, and I believe that is this token. And if a fighter is on guard, both dodges and shields are counted. Shields and dodges are both counted as successful defenses. So if you're going to try and turtle down and hold an objective, you might want to go on guard. And so if somebody attacks you, you're going to have both your at least a 50% chance of getting a success on the defense die. And a knockback is a successful attack action that is noted as having knockback. And so basically with knockback, you can actually drive somebody off of a hex. And if you actually knock somebody back off of the board, they hit the wall and they're going to possibly take some damage. So let's take a look at the game. Not a complete rules walkthrough, not a complete review, just taking a look at how the game plays and the different phases. You know, I've played a couple times. I really like the game. You know, obviously I'm a miniatures player and play a Warhammer Age of Sigmar, but I think this is something, you know, it plays in 30 to 40 minutes, and especially once after your first game and you get used to what the steps are, it really plays pretty fast. So if you're just wanting something really quick, this is something that you're going to want to take a look at. You know, I think just a regular board gamer can get into this. There's the miniatures themselves. You know, you can play red versus blue. You can go ahead and paint them up. So you can actually take a lot of time and paint these things up and make them look real nice. So you can just play it like it is, like it comes in the box and put together. I believe that they are trying to make this game more of a organized play type of thing. So there's organized play events, and so you may want to get into that. The rules are pretty tight. I know that Games Workshop, sometimes the rules are a little bit of trying to decide what does this mean or stuff. And so this actually has a pretty tight rule set. And going forth, they have several new factions that are coming out. There are the Sepulchral Stalkers, which are basically skeletons from the city. There's the Orcs, using the proper term. So there's basically the Orc faction. And there's a Skaven faction that's just been announced. And each of these are going to have their own cards, as well as unique cards or common cards that you can use to build your deck. And I think that's the real draw of the game, is the fact that you're able to build your own deck and customize your deck such that it builds to your play style. Perhaps you're going to build a really defensive deck, and you're going to do one of these shift type things. And you're going to try and hold your objectives back here, and basically you could try and, you know, hold just these 3 squares up here, and be very defensive, and nobody can actually move through you at that point. And so that might be a strategy. You know, of course, the strategy to just try and wipe everybody off the board is valid as well. And so that's my summary of taking a look at Shadespire, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks.